From a flightless simulator at Ferris Air to a momentous meeting in an alley to the complex mind of an architect to every far sector in space and to the brilliance of the central power battery on Oa. This is the podcast that covers the adventures of all of your favorite ring slingers. This is the Emerald Echo with your hosts, Adam and the Emerald Enthusiast.
Welcome to another episode of Emerald Echo, a Green Lantern podcast and midcast. As always, I'm your host, Nathan, and with me is my co-host, the Emerald Enthusiast himself, Donnie. Donnie, how's it going?
What's up, Lantern fans? It's the man whose ring runs on fanboy energy. It is the Emerald Enthusiast, and we're back to talk Night Terrors.
Specifically, the Green Lantern side of Night Terrors, obviously, because we're on Emerald Echo. You know what's not a terror, Donnie?
What is not a terror?
Yeah, what's not a terror? When we have Green Lantern representation in live action. And we haven't had that for a long... okay, we have had that in Stargirl,
right?
Kind of, sort of. But
yeah.
In terms of a big screen presence, we haven't had that since 2011.
Right.
Well, and technically in the Justice League with that
with
cameo
Yamander
that nobody knows, and nobody knew except for you.
I'm the only person in the whole world.
and then the Garage Lantern, the cameo that never was, and all that jazz. But we're finally getting, for the first time on the big screen, really, since 2011, some Green Lantern representation. And it's coming in James Gunn's directed Superman Legacy. Because prior to the writer and actor strike, we got word from the Hollywood trades that in addition to Mr. Terrific, Hawkgirl, and Metamorpho being in the film, Green Lantern will make his presence felt in Superman Legacy, specifically of the Guy Gardner variety. And Guy Gardner, Green Lantern, will be played by none other than Nathan Fillion. Mm-hmm. Donnie, what's your take on this?
All right, I do have some, let's just say some nuanced feelings about it. I love Nathan Fillion. Anybody who knows Green Lantern's history on screen, specifically animation, knows what Nathan Fillion has contributed. I think he's a great actor. Guy Gardner, I think a good choice for this project. My only question is just how far do they go with the humor? And I hope they don't make him like kind of the scapegoat for the humor. And they give him an important part to play. And we see him as Green Lantern. That it's not too slapstick. That's my only concern.
Yeah, I love Nathan Fillion as an actor. Personally, for me, Firefly was the thing that really sort of put him into high gear for me. And then obviously voicing Hal Jordan several times in the animated
By the way,
films.
make sure to listen to our Guy Gardner origin episode. We just uploaded that again recently.
Yeah. We brought it back specifically to...
We tweaked it a little bit.
To take out information that's no longer relevant.
Yeah, exactly.
As is the case that we had to do when there's 10,000 regime changes in the 2 years that we've been doing this podcast or whatever it is. But
we've actually been doing this for 3.5 years now.
Oh wow, this shows you how much I know. Folks, I'm just here for the entertainment value. Donnie's the brains of the operation. So I know him from Firefly and voicing Green Lantern, and of course he was on Castle, which I enjoyed. And what's funny is my mom actually remembers him from when a soap opera she used to watch, and so there's generational appeal for Nathan Fillion, at least in my family. The interesting thing for me is the Guy Gardner, the fact that he's playing Guy Gardner, because for the last 20 years, maybe. All we've been hearing is fan casting of, Nathan Fillion as Hal Jordan. Nathan Fillion
Because
as
he's
Hal
been
Jordan.
yeah.
So I feel like James Gunn went, all right, I'll give you Nathan Fillion, but as Guy Gardner.
If he pulls this off, now what I have to do is go to a con and get him to sign a Hal Jordan figure and a Guy Gardner figure.
That would be interesting. A couple of things, just why I think it'll be more of a meaningful thing than just a Guardians level cameo is because, and God bless James Gunn for putting up with all the nonsense from the fans, but James Gunn was asked a question on one of the social media outlets, I can't remember which one, about Nathan Fillion as Guy saying, will he, is this like a one-off, or is this, what is this? Does it have relation to the Lanterns series that is part of the DCU Chapter 1 slate? To which James Gunn replied that yes, the Lanterns show is connected to the films, and that Nathan Fillion will play Guy Gardner throughout the DC universe. So so it's not a separate entity. It doesn't appear to be a one-off type of deal. Mm-hmm. What I like about this is, in terms of, what's twofold. One, that we're getting a DC universe that is already existing, which is different from the Man of Steel, Superman was the only one, and then through retroactive,
they built from that
through WB saying, oh, we want to do Avengers numbers, so force feed every DC hero into the Superman sequel, which became Batman vs Superman. As opposed to doing it that way, this is being thought of from the get-go as a DC universe that exists and is alive and vibrant and things of that nature from the get-go. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing I like about it. The second thing I like about it, and more importantly pertaining to the Green Lantern of it all, is that Green Lantern is part of the proceedings from the get-go and not a thrown-in afterthought in a cameo.
Obviously, yeah. I mean, that's what I want to hear about the Green Lantern Corps and the Guardians already existing. That was my issue with what came before, was if we get them way down the line, that leaves so many unanswered questions.
Like what the hell were they doing when Doomsday came around? Like, hello?
Exactly. With all these world-ending and universal threats, where were the Guardians? Where were the Green Lanterns?
I think the Green Lantern of Sector 214 at that point was probably on whoever that was probably on the toilet or a construct of a toilet, doing his business, and that's why he missed the whole thing. That's the only logic I can come up with. So. But yeah, so I'm intrigued that again we're getting a living, breathing DC universe right from the first film, which is Superman Legacy, and then the second thing is that Green Lantern is part of the proceedings from the beginning. As to and the idea that the thought process of the fact that in this universe we are already going to have 3 human Green Lanterns, because the Lanterns show is going to, the main stars of the show are John and Hal. So the fact that, we're going to have at least three human Green Lanterns in operation, but, when Lantern hits as a series, is a welcome and intriguing possibility, because, and you can only do that when you put him in a already established existing DC universe. Had they gone origin, by the time we get to the 3 to 4 human Green Lanterns, you and me are going to be 20 years older than we are right now. So that's another reason to appreciate the doing it this way. And so, in terms of, again, just to close it out, in terms of the Nathan Fillion of it all, I like him as an actor very much. I think he could definitely pull Guy Gardner off. He's got that swagger to him that he could do it. Mm-hmm.
And if he doesn't, I think we should bring back that internet petition to have the Nathan Fillion Civilian Pavilion somewhere.
Yeah, why not? I say let's do it. And the other thing is, in regards to us seeing Guy as the first, seeing Guy, or let me rephrase it. The first Green Lantern we see being Guy Gardner is not an issue for me. I know some people are screaming about, well, but this guy was first, and that guy was first, and this guy was first. And look, at the end of the day, these movies are adaptations. They're not a blow recreation of the comics continuity. My concern is, and what I think the main concern of fans should be, is what is the portrayal of the character? Are the core essential elements of that particular character, be it Hal, John, Guy, Kyle, Kilowog, etc., are the core essential elements and the motivations of the character intact? More so than a copying and pasting of exact continuity from 1943 or whatever the case may be.
And again, if you watch our episode on Guy's origin, if they tried to stick to Volume 2, would be very complicated.
Yeah,
to do that.
And it would, honestly, if you're going to be a stickler to that degree of any continuity, you're going to confuse mainstream audiences because they are not as in step with this stuff like we are.
Right, and his development took so many years.
Yeah.
Between 1968 and the 80s, when he finally began to be a regular part of the Green Lantern mythos, but that was after coming out of a coma. So I don't think they can deal with all of that.
I mean, if we really want to get technical, Alan Scott should be in this movie because that's the first human Green Lantern, technically, right? So, I mean, if we're really going to be sticklers about continuity, somebody I shouldn't say this because some idiot's going to do it. Somebody should tweet James Gunn and ask him where Alan Scott is, but please don't do that. Let the man work. Leave him alone. For God's sake.
And who's to say we won't get some reference to Alan? You
never know. Exactly, and that's the best part, Donnie. Despite Twitter trying to pretend that we know what's going on, the only person that knows what's happening is James Gunn, and for right now, that's okay.
Yeah, and being that his ring's not tied to the central power battery, there are ways to go about that. So,
listen. At the end of the day, let's get it. I think it's exciting that we're getting Green Lantern and Guy Gardner in this DC universe. Let's enjoy that for now. Let's see how it develops. Learn more about what version of the character this is, and et cetera, and then we can start having other conversations. But right now, I think as Green Lantern fans, we should be excited, and we should let James Gunn, as the kids say nowadays, quote unquote, cook.
Yeah.
All this talk about cooking makes me hungry, but apparently the kids like to do it. So let him cook, and let's see what ends up on our plate come July 2025.
Let him cook. That's right. We're hip here on this podcast.
Overall, I think we're going to put that word out of style real quick. But overall, you're excited by the inclusion of Green Lantern and Guy Gardner done? Is that the overall sentiment? Is fair to say?
I'm pretty much for any Green Lantern that they want to put out there as part of, and I know where you're going. I can see you already. Just about any Green Lantern except Nort, but and that's another concern of mine. I'm like, is he going to drag Nort along? Please.
Oh, listen, I'm going to position. That's the one thing I'm going to bother James Gunn about is to give us a Nort Christmas special, just so I can make you review it right here on the show. Come on,
I would do it for the mythos.
James, I know you're not listening to this because there's 5 people listening to this, but on the off chance if you stumble on this while you're on the can, make a Nort Christmas special for Donnie. He wants it despite his protest. He really wants it. Come on, James.
Okay.
Hashtag make the Nort show.
So you really think that James Gunn's sitting on the toilet watching this podcast on his phone or something?
I don't know, maybe.
Hey, yeah.
It's either that or be bombarded with Snyderverse hashtags. I mean, what would you rather do, Donnie? Listen to us or listen to that nonsense? I say we're a really good option.
Oh, man.
But of course, as we learn more about Guy Gardner in Superman Legacy and the Lantern series. We'll bring that information to you. First things first, get these strikes sorted out, Hollywood, so we can finally get Superman filming and we get that first shot of Nathan Fillion in costume with his bowl cut, which James Gunn is eager to give him. So
yes.
Get these strikes over with Hollywood and let's go, because I'm ready for this new DC universe.
Right.
But we'll bring you more info on this and the Lantern series.
Pay the creative people.
Yes.
Let's everybody get a fair share and let's go forward.
And let's get back to work for these guys, because I know they want to create these stories and keep telling entertaining stories. So let's let them do that. But we'll bring you more news as we have it. And that's pretty much it for the news this week. So we will take a quick break. And on the other side of the break, we'll come back and talk Night Terrors, Green Lantern issues 1 and 2. So stay tuned for some summer heroics and frights.
Very quickly, make sure you watch My Adventures with Superman if you're a Superman fan.
Absolutely. And that will be something that we're reviewing on the
DC Comics
Legacy. Well,
Krypton's Legacy. Okay.
There we go. Podcast. I had to remember which one it was.
Yeah.
See,
maybe there'll be a Green Lantern and we can review it on this podcast too.
Yeah, we'll do a little cross promotion. Why not?
Right.
On the same network, it's fine. We do what we want here, but let's take a break. I'll get the name of whatever podcast I'm doing sorted out, and we'll be back talking Night Terrors. Stay tuned, everybody.
Don't go anywhere.
What's up, everyone? It's the Emerald Enthusiast. For all of your multiverse viewing and listening needs, check out our shows, which include Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Ghostbusters, Power Rangers, the Marvel Universe, and the DC Universe, including the Emerald Echo podcast. You can check us out on Podbean, and remember to subscribe right here on YouTube. That's the Multiverse Musings Podcast Network. From the first podcast to the last.
And we're back.
We absolutely are, and as promised, we are going to get a little scary and talk Night Terrors, Green Lantern, issues 1 and 2.
Mm-hmm.
So, Donnie, take it away, issue 1.
We're going to launch right into Green Lantern Night Terrors #1, Doorway to Death. And this picks up right after issue #2 of Green Lantern. Hal and Carol, they are in this plane from Ferris, and all of a sudden something happens, and the plane is taken over. And that leads us right here into Night Terrors #1. Hal Jordan ends up going through a door, and lo and behold, he is faced with one of his biggest fears. And before I get into that, I just want to say, though, I do like the art style here.
I love it.
I have gotten used to already the black shoulders because, for years we saw, the green shoulders after, after Rebirth. I really like this style that we've gotten here. Hal is immediately transported to his dad's funeral. And things are serious when you see the yarmulke and the menorah, and all of a sudden Hal is a boy again, looking at his dad's coffin, and things are very solemn. And then all of a sudden the coffin starts to open, and lo and behold, it is Martin Jordan. But this is a nightmarish, ghoulish, rotting version of Hal Jordan's dad.
It looks really creepy. I will say the art was so well done that it was gruesome. But you know what's funny too? The whole scene, being at the funeral, the whole thing. This is me being the fan that I am. I swear to you, when the page turned over and you saw the funeral set up, remember Paul Bearer's funeral parlor? I had in the back of my mind, the music was playing. I was just like, if this was the olden days of Ron Mars and Darryl Banks, there would have been an Easter egg for Paul Bearer somewhere in that book. I was kind of waiting for it. It didn't happen. But
I have some thoughts on that at a different point in the story, so we'll get there.
Okay.
But again, so we're at the point here where, again, the coffin opens and out comes this, zombified horror, rotting version of Hal's dad. And I looked at it, and it was to me, it was kind of symbolic of what Elon Musk is doing with Twitter these days. It's just kind of rotting from within.
Yeah, it's
so
true.
anyway, so Hal is chased, and I mean, Hal as a boy, chased by all of these family members and attendees at these funerals, at this funeral, and these are like ghoulish, horrific versions of those people.
Yeah, it's very creepy.
So Hal goes through another door, and lo and behold, he's at Ferris Air. And I really like this, going through these. You understood what was happening here, even if you weren't completely up on what's been happening with Green Lantern, because they're taking you through these massive events in Hal Jordan's history.
Yeah, the basics.
And by the way, stick with us to the end here, because I think there's something really important that Jeremy Adams is working towards here. So we see Hal have an interaction with Carol, and she is really nasty to him. I mean, he's still kind of playing, the suave flyboy or whatever.
Flirtatious, yeah.
Yeah, and she's like, just get it done, Jordan, very mean to him. And I'm like, all right. But she's obviously, again, he's in a nightmare. So everybody he's seeing here is from this like dream realm that he's in, which I originally thought that like Insomnia was all of these versions, but I don't think that's the case, because later on, and I think it's actually an issue too, I think it's Parallax, and we'll get there in a minute, says Insomnia is calling to me. So these are some kind of like conjured versions in this nightmare world of all these characters.
Yeah.
So now the flightless simulator basically takes control. Hal tries to get in it. The thing immediately takes him to Abin Sur.
Yeah. So far it's very in keeping with the actual origin of it all. So far things are going along as normal.
Mm-hmm. I really love what Jeremy Adams did here. The art is good, by the way. We'll say that too. Love the coloring.
Yeah. The coloring is what I think. It really is. It pops. It's very striking. I love it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and what happens here? Instead of Abin Sur dying and passing his ring on, he uses the ring to drain Hal Jordan's essence.
Yeah.
It's like, the Skeksis and the Podlings and the Dark Crystal, let me have your essence, Essence good. Essence of Gelfling, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, that was all going through my head anyway. So yeah, I've read and watched way too much sci-fi and stuff in my life, but
for sure.
But it just, this villainous, laughter coming from Abin Sur. And I also like that you still see Hal's heroism here, because he actually cuts off his own finger trying to get the ring off, which he does get the ring off. But that was his effort in trying to stop himself from being siphoned of his essence.
Right.
And yeah, so what were your thoughts there?
Like I said, I at first, when it was happening, I'm like, okay, it's going along as normal. And so what's going to be the difference here? But then that twist with Abin Sur and what he does to Hal, it's very much like one of the worst case scenarios. Like if somebody stumbled on an alien that was trying to give him this alien technology, what's one of the worst things you can think of happening is what we see play out.
Well, and imagine taking, everybody has, sort of the pillars of their life that sets them up to be who they are.
Yeah.
Imagine if one of those not only, withered away, but was then turned around and used against you.
Yeah.
And that's what I liked in that situation, that was a very defining moment in the history of Hal Jordan as Green Lantern, obviously, getting his ring. And now it's turned against him here.
Yeah, and if that's going to be your undoing, what would that, how does that affect you, right? So, yeah.
But we see Hal go through another door, and now he is Green Lantern again. But he's face-to-face with the Guardians, the Central Power Battery.
I think that's a nightmare on a good day, like the way they have been over the years. I mean, it's
right.
Dealing with their bureaucracy and all their crap. That would be a nightmare in and of itself, and then you actually add on to it. It's
Yeah. I just reread the Rise of the Third Army where they turned against the Corps.
So good. Such good stuff.
Yeah, that was stuff. It ended a little abruptly, but man, was that creepy.
We'll get there eventually on the show.
So, yeah, we'll talk about that too. Now, this is where I think Jeremy Adams gives us some clues as to where he's going with the main title.
Okay.
Because Hal seems very flummoxed here by the whole situation. And it seems like some event, something massive has happened on Kuragar. Recently happened on Kuragar, okay?
Yeah.
And I want to say this. My initial impressions were, I think when, and I mean this of the Green Lantern series, was that some kind of battle may have happened and that something happened to Saronic Natu. And that's why Sinestro was on Earth, maybe looking for revenge against Hal Jordan. I'm not sure well, I don't think actually that something happened to Saronic now. There may have been still some kind of clash between the Sinestro Corps and the Green Lanterns, but I don't think it's Saronic that they're talking about here. Someone has died. Recently, someone has died. Someone close to Hal Jordan. Now, it's interesting that Hal says in many panels here, but he holds his hand to his head and he goes, "No, this room, you, Kilowog." Something's odd to him about Kilowog being here. So, and this has been floating around. I'm not the only person who's come to this conclusion. It may be that the person he's talking about, that the event that happened on Kuragar, the death that happened, is actually Kilowog. Now, I know we've seen Kilowog in this series.
That's what I was just going to say, but we just saw it. Yeah.
But did we actually see Kilowog? We saw Hal talking to someone not in his uniform. Okay? Is that Hal's way of basically trying to make peace? He's looking up at the stars in these issues. Is that his way of trying to work through the trauma? And we're going to find out. And I'm not saying that Hal's hallucinating, by the way. I don't want to give people that impression. That at some point we're going to see that version of Kilowog is not real. Okay. Because we know that somebody died. We know that John's alive. We know that Kyle's alive, and we know that Guy's alive. Okay, because John's getting ready for his own series. We also just saw Kyle and Guy in Doom Patrol #3. Somebody's dead. Somebody close to Hal Jordan. It can't be Simon. He hasn't really had a lot of contact with Simon lately. So if I'm wrong about this, I'm sorry, but someone very close to Hal Jordan at this point has died. Okay. But for what we're dealing with here, at this point, Hal Jordan realizes that everyone who's surrounding him here is not the people that they're supposed to be.
Yeah.
And so Hal fights back with a lot of really cool constructs in this issue. I think the constructs here are better than actually the next issue. Like we see a bunch of like what they look like to me, like, you know, Roman soldiers.
Yeah, that was a badass page.
Yeah. That was really cool.
Yeah, that was really cool. And then, you know, what I liked about it too was one of the last things we see is a transition from that to Parallax. We see that's the next form of them that the nightmare takes, right?
Yeah. And he says, "Welcome to your greatest nightmare."
And it's you know, the reason why we're getting so many variations of a nightmare for Hal is because he's able to resist fear, right? And bury his fears deep down so he can, you know. And I think that's what was his name? Insomnia?
Insomnia is the main villain.
Yeah.
That is
even says
orchestrating this.
Yeah. I've had to, you know, you've been tougher than your, you know, basically saying you're tougher than your other Justice League compatriots because you're able to bury your fear and resist your fear more so than they are, which I think is an important thing to put in this issue, because when the character is about not being fearful or having no fear and if you instantly make him afraid right from the get-go, it kind of, devalues a core character trait. So I'm glad that they went to great lengths to point out that this is the reason why I've had to go cycle through 3 or 4 different nightmares for you. So I like that aspect of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Obviously, insomnia is realizing that, Hal Jordan's a different animal when it comes to dealing with fear. Obviously, for the longest time, Green Lanterns were said to be fearless.
Yeah.
Then we get the deeper, more nuanced stuff. They overcome fear.
Yeah.
You have shown the ability to overcome fear. That's what they say when they get inducted.
Yeah.
So obviously, this is somebody who deals with fear differently as a Green Lantern, and Insomnia starts to learn that. But the scene ends with Parallax coming out of the battery, and again, I mean, the entity that we're used to.
Yeah, absolutely.
So then we shift to the backup story, Shards of Glass Part 1. And this is why I want to clarify why I was one of the reasons why I was thinking that maybe something had happened to Saronic Natu in a big battle, because Sinestro no longer has his ring. And as far as I know, unless I missed something in the previous issues, we don't know why that is, but he definitely doesn't have it here because he gets roughed up by a civilian here on Earth and he goes to use his ring and it's not there.
Right.
So he's not cloaking it or anything like that. It's just not there. So somehow, some way, he has lost like his connection to, to his ring and to his energy. So how did that happen? I don't know, and I'm sure we'll get more answers as time goes on.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I'm thinking, that has to be. I mean, it would stand to reason that the reason why Sinestro is on Earth going after Hal Jordan is it has something to do with some kind of clash that happened between the Sinestro Corps or maybe just Sinestro and the Green Lanterns.
Right. Yeah, and I would hope that we'd learn what happened to his ring. Otherwise, I'm sure Jeremy Adams will take care of that.
So what we see in this issue is Sinestro begins to deal with his own nightmares.
Mm.
And that includes being caught between this nightmarish, ghoulish, giant version of himself with like a long tongue. It's almost like a kind of like devil. It's like a devilish, like almost Venom type of huge character, but it's Sinestro. But then a version of himself arrives that has 7 faces. And that kind of, even though it's monstrous, it represents his past connection to heroism in the Green Lantern Corps.
Yes, yeah.
I just loved how creepy that looked. I mean, it had like the eyes and the forehead, and yeah.
It was disturbing. You're right. It looked like something out of the Venom universe, right? But also, I think what's interesting about the backup issue is that it really is an internal struggle with himself. Like, Hal's nightmare involve other external, like internal and external problems, right? Mm-hmm. Sinestro's nightmares are all internal. It's all problems with himself.
Right.
A struggle, like he's fearful of the person that he is, or was, or has become, or a variation of all three.
Well, he's a shell of his former self, as we see here, struggling to find himself. I'm not quite on board with this idea of, okay, so he was used by Pariah. Okay, we saw that, and I don't know, like he's saying that like basically he saw himself used by another villain in a more effective way than he has. I'm not sure I quite buy that as far as Sinestro looking at, being brainwashed.
Or maybe that's the fear talking, right?
That could be. Yeah.
That's how I took it anyway.
But he's definitely at this point, he's kind of wallowing in the sorrow of feeling like a failure.
Right.
And feeling directionless. And that's where his nightmares are rooted in.
Right. Yeah. It's just interesting the different dynamics between what Hal's nightmare is and what Sinestro's nightmares are. It's and Sinestro's, the whole nightmare scenario where he's in a battle with versions of himself. It's kind of reminiscent of Superman 3, right? When Superman battles
That's a good point. Yeah.
the dark version of himself. So I thought that's something that clicked for me. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. But yeah, I just it's so fascinating it's such a unique scenario seeing Sinestro in this kind of shape.
Mm-hmm.
Not something we see often.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Down and out.
Yeah, very much so. And I think one thing that I take away from this backup story that I think him and Hal kind of share, they both have visions of come on, the guy that gave
Abensur?
Yeah, thank you. Sort of one of the things they have in common, kind of thing, is living up to the legacy of Abensur. I think both of them, Hal and Sinestro. So that was one of the few commonalities between their nightmares, is that there's an element of that involved in it.
All right. Well, that's how things end. Again with that version of Sinestro showing up again with the seven faces, and that's where it ends for Sinestro there.
And I like how there was some panel. One of the versions is him in the blue outfit, the classic.
Oh yeah, I love that outfit.
That was just so cool with that exceptionally thin mustache. It's very, I
just did a review on my YouTube channel of a pre-Sinestro core Sinestro
cool.
figure. So.
But all right, so let's rate issue number 1. What did you think of it overall?
My only issue is probably not the word. I feel I really feel like this could have been stretched to 3 or 4 issues.
Sure.
To delve into some of the minutia of what they're dealing with here. And that's my only issue. Outside of that, I'm gonna give the art a 5. From all the artists, and I'm going to give the writing a 4.5. Again, both of the stories I thought were developing really well. I would have liked a little bit more time, but what I see in issue 2, I think actually wraps things up well. So we'll talk about that soon. What are your thoughts?
I think the Sinestro story needed some more meat on the bone. That one felt more rushed than I was satisfied with the Hal Jordan portion. The Sinestro story only had about 9 or 10 pages, so it was more condensed.
And the writers have got to feel like claustrophobic when you're told, here's the number of pages or panels that you get, and you're like,
for sure,
that's got to be tough.
I need more, but overall, I'd give the story a 4.5, and the art is a 5 because they're just beautiful. But I'm right there with you in terms of the rating.
All right. Let's jump into issue number 2, Green Lantern Night Terrors. And just going to hold up the cover here. I love this cover too.
That's creepy.
That's the main cover. I have a bunch of the variant covers too, but they're in a box.
Really shocking.
Did you see all of those covers that are solicited for like 4 and 5?
Your wallet is going to be so screwed.
By the way, I've got something major. The solicits have kind of given away, I think, something major here because I read those about what's coming for Sinestro. So let's talk a little bit more about that. So this opens up again where we were, Hal Jordan confronting Sinestro, and he actually morphs from the yellow entity back into the original classic look. One of my favorite, all-time favorite costumes in comics, the cape and the modified Green Lantern symbol.
Parallax talking about.
Yeah. Okay. Who did I say?
No, you didn't say anything. That's just clarifying. I knew who you were talking about, but just to clarify.
And Parallax morphs from the entity back into the original Parallax. Yeah. And Parallax is trying to torment him. And again, you see in the background here what we saw in the previous issue. Abensur, Hal as a kid going through the death of his father, as well as this judgment of the Guardians.
Yeah, he goes back. They fight through all 3 doors or whatever. How many doors are. If you're easily scared, you're never going to, after reading these 2 issues, you're going to be weary every time you open a goddamn door. No, you know what I really like from this second issue is two things: the shock at which
Insomnia.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Insomnia there as Hal Jordan Parallax, as he sees Hal Jordan chasing him down, like flying, behind him, chasing him. It's like, this is impossible. Like, he's shocked at how resilient he is, right? Which I thought was really cool. Because I'd imagine a lot of big villains would probably underestimate Green Lantern just by like, what's your thing? A ring, like big, big whoop, right? But so I liked his reaction, but also Hal's attitude, Hal's cockiness about, oh look, I made the guy, the big scary guy, run away, or when he confronts his zombified nightmare of his relatives, he's like, all right, fam, did you miss me? And I'm like, oh,
yeah, I like the symmetry of that, because what we start to see here is that Hal goes back through those doorways that we saw him go through before,
overcome his,
and starts to take control of that.
Yeah.
But as Parallax is trying to intimidate him, he looks at Hal and he's like, "Are you smiling?" And he's like, "Okay, buddy, you picked the wrong planet and the wrong person to try to scare."
Yeah.
And he forms this massive, like, mechanical armor construct, and he punches Parallax.
Yeah. I gotta say, the splash page, because every time Hal threw a big punch, there were splash pages in this book, and there were a couple of splash pages. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. Like, the art is just.
And this is when Parallax looks up and says, "What are you?" This is where I was thinking, he was like, "I'm Green Lantern, and I'm your worst nightmare."
Yeah.
I was just waiting for him to say, "Rest in peace."
Yeah, I'm telling you, this book had off. If only Daryl Banks was drawing, we would have got some Undertaker references for sure.
It wouldn't have been cool, Ganthet would have come up behind him with, like, a construct urn, and it's like, "Oh, Parallax!"
Yeah, I was waiting for it. Somebody's gonna find out if Jeremy Adams is a wrestling fan, and if he is, why didn't he include some Undertaker references in this? Because I was waiting for him.
See, now I was reading that, and I was just thinking to myself, I need somebody to draw me like the Lantern Taker, like Hal Jordan as the Undertaker.
I think you should do a commission from Daryl Banks again.
Yeah, that would be awesome. That would be awesome. So, and so again, we're talking about, taking things full circle here, going back, and he confronts that villainous version of Abin Sur. And so he makes, I forget what you call these, like the strongman games.
Yeah, the one with the one where you hit the bell with the hammer. And
with the hammer, to see how far you can get to go up. Yeah. And he even says, not only does he like knock Abin Sur out of the panel, he's like, "Yeah, eat your heart out, Clark." And I'm like, all right,
because the construct says "world's strongest man."
Yeah,
and that's where
strongest
he said,
man alive. Yeah,
strongest or something. And that's when he says, "Eat your heart out, Clark." And I'm like, man, poor Superman takes crap from everybody. Green Lantern, Batman, Green Lantern, he takes garbage from it. And
Hal is stealing lines from everybody here, because remember a couple issues ago, he was, when he was dealing
Batman,
with the demolition team, he was like, "I am the Knight." Yeah.
But you know what's funny though? The funny thing is, you gotta respect Clark for just like standing there and being like, "Okay, have your fun," because in reality, he could destroy everybody if he really wanted to. Like that's the beauty of Superman. He's just like, "Hey, yeah, have your fun," but you're lucky. You're lucky I'm a nice guy. Otherwise, you'd all be dead.
So my only issue here is the battle that goes on. And don't get me wrong, these are drawn well, but Hal makes a lot of guns, and I usually associate that more with John, and I like the more like creative constructs from issue number 1.
Yeah. I'll give you that. Yeah, that's fair.
And I've seen some people say that Hal was being kind of, I don't know, like overly cocky or kind of cartoonish in the way he was acting. I kind of thought that as he understands that he's in some type of dream world.
Yeah, he knows he's in a nightmare. Just play it up.
Right, exactly. So he, again, he's kind of this exaggerated version of himself.
Yeah, and I kind of liked it. I was having a ball with it. I had fun with it. And
it was fun.
I wanted him to do like an LA Night kind of deal, where it's like, who's like when the guy's like, "What are you?" and it's like, Whose game is this?
Green Lantern, yeah!
Waiting for it.
Oh my gosh. The people listening to this podcast who don't watch wrestling, they're really
They're
confused
like,
right
what
now.
are these two idiots talking about?
So, again, remember Hal's nightmare started with going to his dad's funeral. He heads back to that funeral home. And at this point, he's really hacked off. And he actually uses, here's the third person he's ripped off. He actually uses the word fragging. I don't think I've ever heard Hal Jordan use the word fragging before.
Yeah,
he says, you're just really making me fragging mad. And I'm like, now he's ripping off Lobo.
Yeah, I mean, he's just taking cues from everybody, which is fine. But you know, the interesting thing with this is I laughed the part where I think it was his aunt.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, let's start with you because I never liked your birthday presents.
Yeah, he said, how about you, Aunt Lacey? I always hated your birthday presents.
Yeah.
See, I love that kind of dark humor.
That was funny. That was hilarious.
Yeah. And he uses a chainsaw construct to basically cut up his family and all of the attendees at the funeral. So he had enough at that point. So
you know, if you're gonna embrace the horror of it all, go for it. Yeah.
And he pretty much, I mean, he just kind of chops and shoots his way through everyone there. So
again, would this have been the Coast City Chainsaw Massacre? Is that what we're
it was close, I tell you. And we get, like I said, and we get a 2 pages worth of that, various panels here, and you see him just, kind of reminded me of The Walking Dead.
Yeah, that's another reference. Yeah, and I think he's transitioning from Parallax back to
right. The important part to say is he says, "Get out of my head." He throws his ring at him, and all of a sudden he is back in reality.
Yeah, and then realizes that he's got to save the plane.
Right. In which case, he makes a giant construct and takes over the plane and makes it into a jet.
Yeah.
Which I thought that's very fitting for Hal Jordan.
Which is very familiar with piloting. So.
Well, and it makes sense that he comes out of a nightmare and he reverts to what he knows.
Right. Yeah.
Because don't we all do that coming out of a nightmare? We like to get our bearings and look at things.
It's like, where am I? What am I doing? Yeah.
Exactly. So whether it's just something simple like brushing your teeth or whatever, with Hal Jordan to ground himself again, he creates a jet. So yeah.
No, it was a solid ending and great fight sequences. Yeah.
Well, and it also says here too that the pages of Night Terror's Night's End, that Hal Jordan presumably is going to this battle.
Yeah, I think all the heroes are gonna team up in the big finale.
Converge. Too. Yeah. All right, so now we are on to Shards of Glass Part 2.
Yeah.
And I had to read through this a couple of times because my impressions the first time and my impressions the second time were different.
Okay.
First of all, if you look at the first 3 panels here, there's a large panel and then 2 small ones. I thought that maybe Hector Hammond was involved here because of the giant head. I was like, is he involved? I don't think that's the case.
No, I don't think so either.
Yeah.
I see where you'd get that because I had a similar thought.
Yeah. Another thing is they keep keying on the word hope here. Sinestro asks, is there hope? And, these ghouls in his dream are saying, no, there is no hope. And yet he's hearing this voice call to him. And so I thought initially, I was like, is there a Blue Lantern outside of this scenario seeing what's going on and trying to assist Sinestro? I don't think that's what's happening.
Yeah, either, something tells me the Blue Lanterns are like, figure it out yourself, dumbass. I don't think they'd want to help him, It's like,
but we see, and I forget which panel it is here. We see it be mentioned that Sinestro did not spend enough time loving those whom he should have loved. And this was another impression that I got, that I read a solicit and this kind of solidified everything for me. I thought they were talking about obviously Saronic, and they mentioned another. And I was like, are they talking about Lisa Drac? Because, Lisa Drac was this unrequited love for Sinestro. The solicits for Green Lantern 4 and 5 talk about a story called Sinister Sons and a new character called Sin Sun. So I think where we're headed is Sinestro having a child whom he previously didn't know.
Oh, all right.
A son named Sinsen, I think.
Oh, that's a little bit on the nose. Whoever his mother
Yeah,
is.
it's a little on the nose, but
whoever his mother is went out on a limb with that one.
But as we see, again, Sinestro's caught between these two versions of himself, the more heroic version, the more monstrous version, and he's going through doorways trying to get away. Somebody is calling to him, and at the end we see that it actually is a version, not the actual Saronic Natu, a version of Saronic Natu, who is this monstrous version. And by the way, this is why I got this impression about the Blue Lanterns. Initially, he's running to this doorway, and the energy kind of looks blue. He's also naked, by the way. I could have done without that, but
I don't need to see naked Sinestro. It's not on my bucket list of things.
I was gonna say we just saw naked Hal Jordan. This
No,
year.
Saronic Natu, actually, now we're getting a little bit more into my realm.
Well, this is like a harpy version of Saronic Natu that he runs.
I think that's for God's sake, I keep forgetting his name.
Insomnia.
Yeah, I was just about to call him Slumber, but it's Insomnia.
Hey, Slumber. That would be a good villain name too.
That's terrible with these events. It was what was it? The Christmas one, the winter one, Frozen Winter, Winter's End, Winter's whatever the hell it was called. I'll never understand whatever it is. Anyway, I'm not good with these event names. Damn it! Stop it. The only one I know is Flashpoint and Identity Crisis. Keep it simple.
But we talked about Hal Jordan, talking about the events in his life. Obviously, Sinestro feels some level of guilt towards not being there for Saronic and letting her be raised by someone else.
What I think is interesting about all this is that it reminds you that there's a being with a conscience and a heart buried deep within Sinestro.
Mm-hmm. Sinestro is not, he has a very villainous modus operandi and a different point of view. That's what makes him the villain, but he's not someone who is evil for the sake of being evil.
So it does make you sympathize with him, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I think. Going through this nightmare with him did make me sympathize with him a little more. Now, by the time that nightmare ends, it looks like he's going to be back to his old shenanigans. So I don't know where my sympathy for him will go, or how long it'll last. But at least throughout this, I was feeling sympathetic for him.
Well, and that's what initially I thought somebody outside the dream was helping him, but by the time he dealt with that harpy version of the nightmarish version of Saronic, it seems like he has come to a place of understanding himself and kind of being like ready for the next stage of the story.
Yeah, I agree.
And let me expound on that just a little bit too. I think there's something actually even a little bit bigger at play here than just the death of someone close to Hal Jordan. If I can draw if I can paint with a wide brush here, the Hal Jordan from Green Lantern Volume 2 was the best because he was the best, okay? He was hardwired to be fearless, and he was awesome. That's why he used the Green Lantern ring so well. The post-rebirth Hal Jordan was always looking for, redemption and always looking over his shoulder for Parallax. What Jeremy Adams has suggested here is that Hal Jordan has finally made peace with Parallax, that part of himself, and he's no longer afraid of Parallax. So he's at a place where he's ready to develop his character beyond just that.
Right.
Okay. Even though that's still important because writers keep bringing that back up. And that's why I will always say that Ron Mars and Darryl Banks were a genius for dreaming that up.
Yeah.
But at this point, what Jeremy Adams is saying is that whatever has happened recently, that's what's kind of the motivation for Hal at this point, and that Parallax is not the thing that he's always looking back and wondering, oh, I can't go down this other road again, and I've got to be careful.
At some point, he's gonna have they're gonna have to move on from that fear of Parallax, and it seems like Jeremy Adams is taking that step, and I'm glad they did it. I'm glad, if anything, from this Night Terrors event. Damn it! If there's anything can be taken away from it, other than a general break from my wallet, because I'm not getting everything, is that some of the characters there's character growth for a bunch of these characters that I've seen. Green Lantern being one of them. Shockingly, Batman's had some character growth in terms of making peace with the night of his parents' death. There's a great scene in Batman Night Terrors #2 where he confronts his younger self, and there's a great scene there that I won't spoil because this is not the Batman podcast. But you saw he's made some progress. Hal's made some progress. Sinestro's made some sort of progress, although I think Sinestro could do with a psychiatrist. Can you imagine him on Harley Quinn's couch? That'd be an interesting conversation. I'd like to be on Harley Quinn's couch, but that's another.
Well, that's
played by Margot Robbie, but that's a whole other conversation. That's not rated PG-13.
That's something different.
And that's far from a nightmare for me. But yeah, so it's nice to see characters having some growth through this, event.
Well, and this is what I mean about, like I said, I think my original impression was wrong because Sinestro seems to, number one, he seems to be alone at the end here. He's just kind of sitting on the ground. Rain is falling on him, and he says, "I'm not afraid anymore. I know who I am now, who I've always been, and it's time to let the world know too."
Yeah, and he's
whatever
got a
is going to happen.
Sinister look on his face.
Sinister. Larry Horowitz. There we go.
That's right.
Whatever is going to happen, the clash between he and Hal in the coming issues, I think this feels fresh. It's something that, again, happened recently. It's not the same old philosophical difference that we've seen in the past. So I'm very interested to see where this goes.
Oh, so am I. I can't wait for him for that first confrontation that apparently we're going to get in issue 3, I think. But my only real negative for Night Terrors as a whole is that I wish this thing had played out over the course of like September through to October. It would make more sense, just the time period, right?
Yeah. And here's the quote that, like I said, that got me thinking, and that when I read the solicits, all of a sudden I realized what was going on here, because Sinestro it says here, "Those you should have loved, but instead have forsaken. My daughter, Saronic, no, and there is another." And initially I thought, okay, they're talking about Lisa Drack because, again, unrequited love there. He should have loved her, but I don't think that's who they're talking about now. I think they're talking about this new character.
Yeah, and if it's his son, that'd be interesting. All I ask is, can somebody draw, whoever's doing the art on that, I think it's Germanico style, if Hal Jordan's in the room and if Donnie's right, and this potential son, long-lost son of Sinestro presents himself and confronts his father, can we have Hal Jordan make a construct of Maury Povich reading the DNA results? Can I have that?
Yeah.
Give me what I want, to quote Batista. And keep the wrestling team running. Yeah. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting,
and we obviously need to know who is dead here. Now, again, like I said, I'm just theorizing with Kilowog. I'm not the only person out there who's done this. If I led you astray, I'm sorry. Again, I've had lots of theories in the past that didn't pan out. So
don't kill Kilowog.
I hope I'm wrong.
But they start a hashtag. Don't kill Kilowog. No, because if they kill Kilowog, you know what's going to happen, right? All the Snyder cultists are going to say, "See, Snyder did it first. Snyder's the blueprint." Anyway, nonsense. But yeah, I mean, so I think the Green Lantern Night Terrors books, issues 1 and 2, were some of the best that the Night Terrors event had to offer. And we're still not done with the Night Terrors event, but I can confidently say that. So unless there's anything else you want to theorize or bring up, let's rate issue 2.
No, I think that's where we are right now, and yeah, I'm very interested to see how this event ends. And obviously, I'm always, anxious to see how the stories are going to turn out for the Green Lanterns, but this one in particular, because it seems like there's so much happening in the future issues.
Yes, it's a good time to be a Lantern fan. But what's your reading?
I tell you, I'm going to go with a 5 and 5 because I love, I love the writing, even though I felt like this was a little bit too compact. I felt like there was more to develop, but that's probably an editorial thing. So I think that Jeremy Adams did the best that he could here, and Alex Segura too. And again, I love this art. I love the combination of horror and heroism, and the way that the Sinestro's nightmares were drawn were just beautiful. So, in a ghoulish way, they were beautiful.
Oh, of course, yeah, I agree with that, and I agree with your rating. It's a 5 for both, and a lot of them, my 5, a lot of it. While I enjoyed the Sinestro story, I just had so much fun with the Hal Jordan of it all, and just like his confidence, and then the fun that he was having in defeating.
I don't think
Insomnia.
Or the henchman or whatever of Insomnia.
Slumber or whatever his name is.
It was his right-hand man, Slumber.
Where was Butterball and all this? That's what I want to know. But yeah, so...
maybe Butterball is Insomnia.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe he ate Insomnia. I don't know. Who knows? Yeah. Anyway, it's a 5 out of 5 for me as well.
And I have to say, too, this is the cover for issue number 1, if you're watching us here on YouTube. And this is the face I make when I get up and it's dark and I stub my toe on the bed.
That looks like me when I was watching the Leafs versus Florida series. That's what that looks like. Talk about a nightmare. But anyway, that brings us to a close for this episode. We hope you enjoyed our reviews of the Green Lantern portion of Night Terrors. We'll, of course, keep covering everything having to do with Green Lantern on this very show. But in between our next episode, if you want to come in contact with Donnie or I and discuss Green Lantern, you can on social media. Donnie, where did they track you down?
You can find me on Twitter and TikTok as The Emerald Enthusiast. I refuse to call it X, by the way. You can also find me on YouTube as The Emerald Enthusiast, where I do lots of collectible reviews. Let's talk comics. Let's talk collectibles. Let's talk Green Lantern.
Yeah, and if you want to find me on Twitter or X, I have 2 words for you. No, actually, I don't have my handle. It's at Adam_Leafsfan. We also have the Twitter page for the podcast network at MMNPDC. We have a Facebook group, which is listed in the link below. Click that, and I will add you, and we can continue the conversation there. But until next time, remember that Night Terrors Green Lantern lasts for 2 issues. From the first time Hal Jordan walks through one of his nightmarish doors to the last. So long, everybody.
So long, everyone.